me just remind you, my shit is just a little bit out of bounds in this motherfucker, you feel me? Yeah. Raise my kundalini, that shit hit like lightning. Raise another god.
Welcome back to Studies in the Fifth Dimension. We're going to start again with the Ty Creek Vortex site. There's a little bit of information that I'd like to get through. It's just very interesting when you think about it, how the author describes it. So in the above diagram, the interlocking spheres have been eliminated to show how the three patches are disc-shaped. In this diagram, all three patches have a common shaped area at the center called a patch head. As with this patch head, their realities take place. Okay. So we're going to go to another slide after this where I'm going to show you just a little bit more information on what this patch head is. Okay. In the above diagram, the red triangles show the beginning of a three-dimensional geometry, which continues down into the patch with all the sacred geometries that are required to create a physical reality. Okay. Spiraling ribbons of energy create complex patterns that start with grid squares to diamond shapes and all the way down into complex grids like the dodecahedron. It's physical reality. Now, this is crazy. I saw a long time ago, people were discovering about bowl-shaped electromagnetic fields, and they were doing experiments. And they were really cool experiments with the bowl-shaped electromagnetic fields. But the understanding is through the bowl-shaped electromagnetic field. So this is what I'm going to show you in just a moment. Just how now, as I'm really starting to get it, is what we're seeing is, the bandwidth of the physical reality, the ending of these different patch heads that are touching and crossing and creating different flavors. What we can see as physical reality with our instruments and things of that nature. That's what we can see, but these are actually large, very, very large spheres of energy that have taken form and shape just as we have learned in these last passages. It's just very, very interesting. So the patch shown above and below the octahedron shell, creating the horizons of the physical. The patch heads spiral into these layers, creating different densities of the physical. That is until they enter too deep into the horizon and physical manifestation is not possible. Shit makes so much fucking sense. The patch is divided into three parts with opposite flowing energy at each end or head and a center band of graduated bands of balanced energy. Okay. Centaurus, a galaxy that shows its true patch shape, with the picture to the right showing its shells. Okay. As the patch inner ribbons of energy cross one another, they create geometries of energy, or strings. These geometry patterns are foundations of the physical. As mentioned, the structure are products of consciousness from all levels. As this geometric pattern ratchets down into complexity, it follows that the level of consciousness also matches in complexity. As these vibrational patterns reach the physical level, they still must maintain a continued flow from their source power. The most complex conscious forms within Earth's realities are humans. To support the non-physical consciousness that connects and maintains the human body, a steady flow of consciousness or conscious energy must be maintained. This flow is also in a spiral pattern. Consciousness lies outside the physical body, while it is the brain and other organs that maintain the interpretive desires from a non-physical source. Okay. Consciousness creates the physical. There's no exception to this. The physical does not, nor will it ever create consciousness. Even if humans were to create life forms, it will not maintain its form without a steady injection of human consciousness, or human consciousness energy. In other words, it is not a life form, but a projection of a human desire. Humans have the ability to create anything as long as the conscious energy is maintained. The creational energy duration is also dependent on the alignment to the universal structure and higher levels of consciousness. This also applies to certain areas of our planet. Along the surface are areas of geographical spots that have more efficient abilities in connecting to the universal source. Though these connections, some spots can arrest time creational abilities, while others speed it up the physical ability to create. This is not a random choice of alignments to source energy flows. They are a resort of different non-physical geometric grids that are part of the patch. It all starts at the reality level of the planet, and it is co-creative abilities to maintain other forms of conscious desires. Very, very brilliant. All right, so here we are at the CIA document talking about the gateway process, and we're going to deal a little bit more with consciousness and how consciousness is perceived in this reality, or how consciousness perceives this reality, and how the source interacts in form, with form, So let's delve into this. All right, hypnosis, transcendental meditation, a lot of cool pictures. Oh yeah, if you guys want to get this, you definitely there's all the information. It's called Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. Okay. Approved for release in 2003. Department of the Army, U.S. Army Operational Group, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, Fort George, G. Meade, Maryland, 20755. Cool. Let's go. Is this a better? It's definitely better. Yeah, come on. All right. It's just dealing with the brain. Oh, shit. All right. So consciousness and energy. Now, before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli in which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence, in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substance, as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean a force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids, solid matter. In the strict construction of the term, it simply does not exist. Rather, the atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. This is what we were just talking about in the Tie Creek Vortex site, dealing with shells of energy. In his book, The Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Itzhak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid which composes the nucleus of the atom vibrates at approximately 10 to the 22nd hertz, which means the 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to 15 degrees hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to 9 hertz. A live human cell vibrates approximately 10 to 3 hertz. The point to be made is that the entire human brain consciousness and all is like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. Just like we were talking about in the Tie Creek Vortex site. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I have cross-referenced all of these sources, and I've been there. People, it's time to go forward with this information. So, human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. Holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a third dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. Okay, let's go back to the Tide Creek Vortex site just so we can give an example. So just as an example, two ribbons of flowing energy, one magnetic, the other electrical, each match vibrational levels at the horizon, creating loops of energy. This is the Tide Creek Vortex site. These figure 8 flows are actually disc-shaped, okay? And like other aspects, have bands of time-oriented harmonics, ascending and descending in the strata of inner horizon tones. It's all vibration. Let's go back. Now, energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using the example cited by Bentov, in which he asked the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles are dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asked the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is certainly flash frozen, so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed by leaving the 3 pebbles still laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful coherent source of light such as a laser. The result will be a three-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. The holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Dennis Gabor in 1947. He later won a Nobel Prize for his work. Laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later following the invention of the laser. As biologist Lyle Watson explains, the purest kind of light available to us is produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When 2 laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object such as a human face, the resulting pattern will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. Now, the part encodes the whole. This is one of the most important parts, and then we'll get to dealing with the hologram book. Of further importance, it is the fact that even if we're dropped off our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and broke it into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. Just as we would say we can find the whole of the universe in ourselves, the way that the universe interacts, the way that black holes interact with reality and matter. You can find that in ourselves. The way that our planet works, you can find that in ourselves. You can find the whole in the smallest parts, because it's a hologram. And so the smaller the piece, the fuzzier, the more distorted it would be, or the less complex it would be. Think about it. Nonetheless would be made. The key to creating any hologram is that energy and motion must interact with energy in a state of rest or non-motion. Remember those 2 balanced and unbalanced states of energy. Energy in a balanced state must interact with energy in a state of agitation. Okay, this is what we were talking about when the 3 patch heads come together and they create a third dimensional reality. 2 balanced states of energy interacting with a third unbalanced state of energy, creating a third dimensional hologram or projection. Okay, but the key to creating any hologram is, once again, is that energy and motion must interact act with energy in a state of rest, non-motion. In the foregoing example, the pebbles represent energy in motion, while the water, before its agitation by the pebbles represents energy at a state of rest. To activate, or in effect to perceive the meaning of a holograph, energy, in this case a coherent light source such as a laser beam, must be passed through an interference pattern generated by an interaction between the moving energy and the energy at rest. In the simple example given by Bentov, this requirement was fulfilled by holding the frozen interference pattern in front of a coherent light to project the three-dimensional holograph image, its meaning, into space. As Marilyn Ferguson, editor of the Brain Mind Bulletin, tells us, another feature of a hologram is its efficiency. Billions of bits of information can be stored in a tiny space. The pattern of the holographic photo is stored everywhere on the plate. Okay? Conscious matrix. The universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Carl Pribram, a neuroscientist, and we're actually going to read Carl Pribram's work after this, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London. The human mind is also a hologram which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness. With respect to states or expanded altered consciousness such as gateway uses, the process operates in the following way. As energy passes through various aspects of the universal hologram, and is perceived by the electromagnetic fields which comprise the human mind. The holographic image being conveyed are projected upon those electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to the extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with and therefore read the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. Changes in the frequency and amplitude of the electrostatic field which comprises the human mind determines the configuration and hence the character of the holographic energy matrix, which the mind projects to intercept directly from the holographic transmissions of the universe. Then, to make sense of what the holographic image is saying to it, the mind proceeds to compare the image just received with itself. Specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of its own hologram which constitutes memory. By registering differences in geometric form and in energy frequency, the consciousness perceives next page. So this is the conscious energy grid showing you how the brain intakes this conscious electrostatic information, and then you see this as form. And it's not necessarily the brain, your consciousness takes this. And so the left hemisphere of the consciousness grid acts like the mind's computer software to reduce input from the right hemisphere to verbal symbols and concepts. The right hemisphere of the consciousness grid reduces three-dimensional holographic images to two-dimensional go, no-go. Okay? Now, the conscious or the consciousness process is most easily envisaged if we picture the holographic input with a three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it, such that all of the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry using mathematics to reduce the data to two-dimensional form. Bentov states that scientists suspect that the human mind operates in a simple binary go-no-go system, so does all digital computers. Therefore, once it superimposes a three-dimensional matrix over holographic information, it wishes to interpret and reduces that information mathematically to two-dimensional form. It can completely process it using fundamental binary system, just as any computer made by the hand of man can process volumes of data and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. Our minds operate in the same fucking way. And I've been telling everybody that our minds literally operate like these computers, or these computers literally operate like our minds do. Okay, perceiving by comparison only, because this is a world of appearances. Bentov states that the proposition this way: our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive only the differences. in states of it, because we're comparing it to ourself. Okay, we represent the one mind seeking to understand itself, and in this, all we see is a world of appearances, a world of differences. It's very interesting in the world of form, and that is the way that we we differentiate things in this hologram, by comparing it to ourselves to see what the difference is. There has to be conflict in order for the mind to understand itself. Okay? In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain is holistic, non-linear, and non-verbal. Or non-verbal mode of functioning acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input, while by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides the secondary matrix through its binary computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison and reduce it to a discrete two-dimensional form. This is the evaluation. To the extent that the gateway succeeds in bringing about a refinement and energy matrix of the mind, it succeeds in expanding or altering human consciousness so that it can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical senses, such that ever more of the universal hologram, not of course accessible by sense perception, can ultimately be perceived and understood. Marilyn Ferguson has written that the theories of Pribham and Baum appear to account for all transcendental experience, paranormal events, and even normal perceptual oddities. She goes on to say that a Pribham. Currently, he is proposing a startling, all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among the intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. His holographic model marries brain research to theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception and simultaneously takes the paranormal and transcendental experience out of the supernatural by explaining them as a part of nature. Like certain strange discoveries of quantum physics, the radical reorientation of this theory suddenly makes sense of paradoxical sayings of mystics throughout the ages. Self-cognition. To complete our outline of the process by which the mind achieves and exercises consciousness, we must also describe the mechanism which accounts for the aspect of human thought that differentiates it from the consciousness of plants or animals, i.e. self-cognition. Humans not only know, but know that they know. They're able to monitor the process of their own thinking and maintain an awareness of it. Moreover, they can conduct a comparative assessment, evaluating the functioning of their thought processes against various objective standards they have adopted. Human consciousness can do this because it has the capacity to duplicate aspects of its own hologram, project them out, perceive that projection, put it through comparison with the memory aspect where its evaluation standards of measured or stored of its own hologram, and measure or sense the difference using three-dimensional geometry, and then binary go, no-go pulse to yield verbal cognition about the self. Up to this point, the discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Now the fun begins. The gateway involves more than just perception of those aspects of the universal hologram which can be accessed in dimensional time-space as we know it. To explain how and why human consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time and space is the next task which must be addressed. To do this, we must first appreciate what time and space are in order to understand how the dimensions they constitute can be transcended. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force that can be transcended, or in motion. In other words, it is a measurement of change. However, in order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way with the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern, so that its confinements give the capacity for being contained at a specific location, which is distinguishable from other locations or space. Energy is not confined, is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity, cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity. It is therefore outside of the dimension of time. It is also beyond space because that concept implies that specific energy form is limited to a specific location and is absent from other locations. He's talking about the source now, source energy. But if energy is the state of infinity, there are no boundaries, no here to differentiate from there, no sense of area. Energy in infinity means energy uniformly extended from there, no sense of area. Energy in infinity means uniformly extended without limit. It has no beginning, no end, no location. It is chaos. I told you I was going to round this shit the fuck back. It's chaos. It is a conscious force, the fundamental primal power of existence without form, a state of infinite being. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest and therefore cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It retains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy and motion out in the various dimensions would make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in the active universe. Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe in which we experience our physical existence are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness and altered states of being may gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability until it reaches a dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops, because the absolute generates no holograms of or about itself. It is every fucking thing. Think about this, people. It is energy that you can't perceive because it is everything. And the higher that you go, the more of the oneness that you can see, the more your awareness becomes certain, because you become pure energy, you become pure consciousness, you become without limit, you become energy. And the more that you tap into this absolute, the more that you raise this, the more that you move away from form. Because even in the fifth dimension, there is no confines, but there are still some recognizable somewhat forms, if you will say, because what they do in the fifth dimension is they create complex energy forms, not necessarily holograms in the sense that we would know them walking on 2 feet and things of that nature. They're more like very complex symbols that are constantly moving and vibrating. They're alive. It's different. And so since the absolute is conscious energy in infinity, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. It overlays everything, as do many of the intervening gradients or dimensions through which the energies of the universe pass on their way to and from their home in the state of infinity, the absolute. To enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence that the frequency of energy pattern which comprises that consciousness, the brainwave output, can accelerate to the point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on an oscilloscope, will look virtually like a solid line. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage for perception of non-time-space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Planck's distance. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as a brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitutes the boundaries of each individual oscillation, movement up or down. With these points of rest, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible, since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change direction and thus continue vibrating between rigid limits. But it is also true that when for an infinitesimally brief instant the energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, that clicks out of time-space and joins infinity, that critical step out of time-space occurs when the speed of the oscillation drops below 10 to the 33rd degree centimeters per second. To use the words of Bentov, quantum mechanics will tell us when distances go below Planck's distance, which is 10 to the 33rd degree centimeter, when we enter in effect a new world. To return our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such high frequencies that the pattern of clickouts comes so close together that there is virtual continuity. Then a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. Thus, as the almost continuous click-out pattern establishes itself in continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance but before reaching the state of total rest, human consciousness passing through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey into Wonderland. The gateway experience with its associated hemisync techniques is apparently designed if used systematically and patiently to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in his physical body or whether he is doing so after having separated that consciousness from the physical body, the so-called out-of-body state mentioned earlier.